She was mopping the lobby floor when the CEO heard her speaking fluent Mandarin, Spanish, and French like a native, and what happened next shook the entire company. Most people at Halberg International hardly noticed the cleaning staff, not out of malice but simply out of habit. They appeared after business hours, quietly wheeling carts, replacing trash bags, wiping down conference tables. They blended into the background like soft elevator music, almost invisible. On Monday morning in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, the main lobby of Halberg International echoed with hurried footsteps, the click of shoes on cold marble, hushed whispers about looming deadlines, the rapid tapping of cell, phone keyboards, and coffee cups clutched like they contained life's answers. Jonathan Kellerman, the company's CEO, strolled leisurely from the parking garage up to the 18th floor, the executive level. His mind was racing with expansion plans for Asia and Europe, but all those thoughts screeched to a halt when he heard a voice. Not just any voice, a clear, crisp, and fluid voice that rooted Jonathan to the spot. He recognized it immediately from visits to their Shanghai office. Mandarin, a complex tonal language. Frowning in astonishment, he scanned the lobby, assuming someone from international sales had arrived early. But the suited executives looked distracted and distant. Then his eyes fell on the digital kiosk, where a petite black woman in the familiar burgundy uniform stood, rag in hand. Denise Atwater, her tightly pinned curls framing a calm face. She was speaking to an elderly Asian gentleman in a navy jacket and thick glasses, guiding him toward the elevators. Her Mandarin was flawless, precise, as if she'd spent her life in Shanghai. Before Jonathan could process it, Denise turned to a young delivery man clutching a clipboard. In an instant, she switched to Spanish, giving clear, gentle directions that made him grin and say, "Muchas gracias." Still stunned, Jonathan watched her address a sharply dressed Caucasian man standing by mislabeled boxes. This time, she spoke softly in French. "Ces cartons doivent être placés dans la salle de conférence B, pas de ce côté-ci." A twitch passed over Jonathan's face, not anger or annoyance, but a mix of confusion and guilt. For years, he'd led Halberg's International Markets Division, proud of assembling the finest team of interpreters. Yet here, in his own headquarters, was the most extraordinary linguist he'd ever met, and she was a janitor just a few floors below his office. He stepped closer, finally attracting her attention. Denise froze, then lowered her eyes. "Excuse me," he began, his voice unusually hesitant. She looked up, startled, and replied politely, "Yes, sir?" With a warm smile and genuine curiosity, Jonathan asked, "Were you just speaking Mandarin?" Denise blinked, then nodded shyly. "Yes, sir." "And so fluently, and Spanish and French too," he continued, eyes shining. She offered a modest smile, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. Jonathan paused, studying her calm composure. No hint of arrogance, only grace. Who was she? How could she speak those languages as if they were her mother tongue? "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 13 years, sir," Denise answered softly. A chill ran down Jonathan's spine. 13 years. Yet he had never noticed her until today. He stood silent for a moment, mind racing. An opportunity was unfolding before him, the chance to uncover the story behind this remarkable woman. "Denise, would you come to my office for a moment?" Jonathan asked. She hesitated briefly, then nodded. As she stepped into the elevator, he watched her go, wondering what secrets lay ahead, and whether this encounter would prove to be the turning point in both of their lives. As the elevator doors closed softly, Leaving behind a faint echo like the final period on that chance encounter, Jonathan Kellerman stood frozen for a moment. A fierce curiosity welled up inside him, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. 13 years Denise Atwater had worked here, and this was the first time he'd truly noticed her. A humble, petite woman, head bowed over her mop as heels clicked past her in the lobby. Yet today she'd inadvertently stunned him with her extraordinary language skills. Jonathan turned and began toward his office, but he halted in the grand lobby when Denise's voice rang out again. This time, it was a language he never would have imagined her speaking, German. Calmly, she was directing a German client, her syllables perfect as if she'd grown up in Berlin. Jonathan watched, transfixed, as though trying to solve a complex puzzle. Next, he saw her switch to Arabic when addressing a small group of Middle Eastern visitors, her fluency on par with a seasoned diplomat. They smiled and bowed with a respect rarely shown to other staff. Denise returned their deference with quiet confidence. The scene left Jonathan both amazed and strangely captivated. Moments later, he heard her speak Italian, soft and lyrical, like a gentle wave drifting along a Venetian canal. Then immediately shift to Portuguese while assisting a trade representative from Lisbon. Only now did Jonathan grasp that Denise's talents went far beyond 3 or 4 languages. Her linguistic prowess was a hidden treasure beneath her modest uniform. Stepping closer, close enough to overhear, but not to intrude, he watched Denise continue her effortless switches as though tuning a radio. She guided a Kenyan guest in soothing Swahili, then conversed in Latin with an elderly scholar, and finally, most astonishingly, in flawless Japanese. Every inflection and respectful bow was executed with such precision that the Japanese visitor responded with equal warmth and gratitude. Jonathan's head spun at the undeniable truth before him. He had always prided himself on building the finest international translation team, yet here, in his own lobby, stood someone whose abilities far surpassed even his top executives, and she had been quietly sweeping the floor all this time. As the last guests departed, Jonathan approached Denise. She recognized him and immediately reverted to her usual reserve, avoiding his gaze. He felt a pang of remorse. Here was a powerful, talented woman accustomed to being overlooked, carrying out her duties in silence. "Denise," he began softly, his tone respectful and warm, "you've truly astonished me today." Denise offered a shy smile. "I was just trying to help people, sir." Jonathan shook his head, sincerity in his eyes. "No, you do much more than that. Tell me, exactly how many languages do you speak?" Denise hesitated. Revealing her full story clearly wasn't something she'd ever considered. At last, she exhaled and answered, "I speak Mandarin, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Arabic, Swahili, Latin, and Japanese." Jonathan's eyes widened, his heart skipping a beat. 10 languages? That's incredible. She bowed her head slightly, hands clasped as though guarding a private treasure, her turbulent past or her boundless humility. Jonathan realized there was a deeper narrative behind her astonishing talents, a message she'd been silently keeping. After a long pause, he spoke with genuine respect. "Denise, I can't fathom why someone with your gifts would choose this work." Denise met his gaze, her eyes shining with quiet determination. "Sometimes life places us where we never expected, sir. I simply do the best I can with the hand I'm dealt." Jonathan held her gaze, understanding that behind those fluent tongues lay a story waiting to be told. Denise Atwater was not merely a custodian with hidden talents. She was a symbol of all the company, and he himself had overlooked. A rare treasure, a profound lesson he'd never forget. From that day forward, Jonathan decided he would uncover every secret, every message hidden within this extraordinary woman. And he knew that choice would change both of their lives forever. Life often presents us with unexpected doors. Sometimes they open just a crack to let in a sliver of light, and other times they remain tightly shut, hiding secrets no one dares to see. For Denise Atwater, the door to the luxurious 18th floor office swung open now, and she felt a rush of fear as she crossed the threshold. Jonathan Kellerman gently invited her in, his courteous gesture meant to reassure her. But Denise knew that behind this conversation lay memories she'd kept buried for so many years. Her legs trembled as she stepped inside, her eyes widening unconsciously as she took it all in. It was the first time in 13 years that she had set foot on the executive floor. The room was vast and opulent, radiating power and wealth, from the gleaming mahogany desk to the floor, to ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Fort Worth. Everything made her feel oddly small. Jonathan sat down behind his desk and motioned for Denise to take the chair across from him. She nodded, doing her best to mask her tension, clutching her familiar white cleaning rag like a lifeline. "Denise," Jonathan began, his voice gentle yet earnest, "I'm sorry I never recognized your talent and contributions before now. After what I witnessed today, I believe it's time we talked." Denise looked up, hesitation and reserve in her big eyes. Yet there was something in Jonathan's tone that made her feel safe. "Thank you for this opportunity," she replied softly, fighting to stay calm. Leaning forward, Jonathan fixed her with a sincere gaze, encouraging her to open up. "I want to understand more about you. How does someone with your extraordinary abilities end up in custodial work?" Denise took a deep breath, gathering the courage to face memories she'd long hidden. After a brief silence, she spoke quietly. "I was a linguistics major at Kent State University," she began. "I thought my life would revolve around lecture halls, language textbooks, and dreams of working at the United Nations or an embassy. But then—" Denise paused, her eyes growing distant as she stared out the expansive window, recalling every painful detail. Jonathan waited patiently, never rushing her. Each word she spoke seemed weighted with the struggles of the past. "My parents both fell gravely ill. My mother with cancer, my father with a stroke. I had to drop out at 21 to care for them," Denise continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Our meager savings disappeared almost immediately. I took every job I could find to pay for treatments and hospital bills." Jonathan's chest tightened. He watched Denise in silence, feeling the raw honesty in her words. "Less than a year later, they both passed away. I was utterly lost, feeling like the world had turned against me. And just when I thought all hope was gone, I discovered I was pregnant." Denise paused, brushing away a tear that threatened to fall. She looked at Jonathan, ensuring he understood her story. "I became a single mother at 22, with no family, no money, no support. I had to make ends meet any way I could, enough to buy food, pay rent, and raise my daughter. That's why I chose this job," she said, tapping the cleaning rag in her hand. "I'd done a lot of work, but night custodial at Halberg was the most stable option I could find." Jonathan sat back, admiration and respect filling his heart for this tiny woman with extraordinary resolve. "But what drove you to keep learning new languages in the midst of such hardship?" he asked gently, his voice full of reverence. For the first time, Denise looked Jonathan directly in the eyes and offered a small, sincere smile. "Language was the only thing that made me feel valuable," she said. "Each new language I mastered gave me hope. Every syllable I learned reminded me that I was still alive, Still trying, it was how I saved myself from despair. Jonathan nodded, his admiration deepening. Then Denise hesitated, her voice dropping as anxiety crossed her face. "But I also know not everyone is willing to look beyond this uniform," she said. "In 13 years here, I've heard the jokes and felt the disdainful stares. Sometimes people see only my skin, my uniform, and decide I'm not worthy of respect." A quiet anger flared within Jonathan. He had never realized that beneath the company's proud culture of progressiveness and respect, such cruelties had unfolded unnoticed for years. Denise met his gaze again, strong yet wounded. "I never imagined I'd sit here talking with you," she said. "But I always hoped someone would see the real me, not just an invisible janitor." Jonathan looked into her eyes and spoke with firm conviction. "Denise, from now on you will never be invisible again." He knew this conversation would change not only Denise's destiny but his own, and the future of Halberg International. Jonathan's words still echoed in Denise's mind, carrying a strange but comforting feeling, like a cool rain after scorching days. "From now on, you will no longer be invisible," he had said with a sincerity rarely heard from a powerful CEO. Denise sat quietly for a moment, her heart trying to absorb what had just happened. But just as she was about to leave that unfamiliar, luxurious office, Jonathan spoke again, his tone now far more serious. "Denise, there's one more thing I'd like to ask of you." She froze, turning toward him in surprise. Jonathan stood, his gaze steady and resolute. "Tomorrow morning, we have a very important meeting with our partners from Brazil. Our official interpreter has fallen ill and can't attend. I want you to serve as our interpreter for this meeting. Do you think you can do it?" Denise felt her heart pound in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. She had never imagined she'd stand in a high-level boardroom, much less play such a pivotal role. "Are you sure you want me to do this?" she asked, her voice trembling but clear. Jonathan nodded firmly. "I trust you." The next morning, Denise entered the expansive conference room on the 20th floor, her heart racing. The space was grand and austere, exuding formality. Curious and skeptical eyes from Halberg's senior team turned toward her. None looked more displeased than Victor Bryant, the Director of International Development, whose cold gray gaze swept over Denise with undisguised contempt. "Jonathan, is this our backup interpreter?" Victor sneered. "She's a janitor, right?" Jonathan met Victor's look calmly. "Miss Atwater speaks 10 languages, and I have full confidence in her abilities." Victor smirked, as if daring Denise to prove them wrong. Just then, the Brazilian delegation entered, heightening the tension. Denise took a deep breath, stood, and greeted them in flawless Portuguese, natural and smooth, as if she'd done it 100 times before. Several heads snapped up in astonishment. The Brazilian partners immediately responded with warm smiles, and the room's tension eased. Jonathan shot a discreet glance at Victor, whose face had gone pale. The first half hour of the meeting went smoothly. Denise's interpretation was both precise and nuanced, reflecting deep cultural understanding. Jonathan felt reassured. Until an unexpected crisis erupted. Mr. Ricardo Mendes, the head of the Brazilian delegation, suddenly bristled. His voice rose as he waved a hand, speaking rapidly in Portuguese, his face flushed with anger as he pointed at the contract before him. Denise paused, realizing a serious misunderstanding was unfolding. A minor error in the translation could jeopardize a multi-million-dollar deal the company had been pursuing for a year. Victor turned to Denise, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction at her apparent distress. Jonathan sat beside him, his expression tense. The room froze for a heart-stopping moment. Denise swallowed, then stood tall. She spoke in impeccable Portuguese, this time with strength, clarity, and conviction. "Mr. Mendes, I understand your concern. Allow me to clarify. The clause you're referring to was agreed upon earlier. The issue lies only in how it was worded in the translation, making it unclear. Please let me restate it more simply and accurately." Silence fell as Denise swiftly and coherently explained the clause. Jonathan watched the partners' faces, realizing she was transforming a critical misunderstanding into an opportunity to demonstrate goodwill and professionalism. Mr. Mendes listened intently, then his expression softened into a gentle smile. "I understand now. Thank you, Miss Atwater. Had we had someone this accurate and professional from the start, we could have avoided this tension." Denise bowed politely, relief washing over her as the crisis dissolved. The Brazilian partners looked pleased, and the room's atmosphere lightened. Jonathan exhaled, casting a discreet look at Victor. The director's smugness had vanished, replaced by frustration and reluctant respect. Denise had not only met the challenge, she'd surpassed everyone's expectations. The meeting concluded on a high note. Before the delegation left, Jonathan approached Denise, his voice warm and sincere. "You saved the company today, Denise. I'm truly grateful." Denise met his eyes and returned a gentle, confident smile. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity." In that moment, for the first time in her life, Denise knew she was no longer invisible. Yet she also understood this was just the beginning of even greater challenges ahead. When the conference room doors closed behind the Brazilian delegation, Jonathan Kellerman remained where he was, his gaze fixed on Denise with unprecedented admiration. In that moment, he realized something within himself had changed forever. The petite cleaning staff member who had once been invisible was now the savior of a multi-million-dollar deal, thanks to a few precise and confident words. A daring idea began to take shape in his mind, one he knew would astonish many at the company. Denise stood there too, her eyes shining with relief that the crisis was over. Jonathan approached her, his voice gentle but firm. "Denise, I am truly impressed by what you did today." Denise blushed slightly and shook her head modestly. "Sir, I only did my best." Jonathan smiled sincerely. "No, Denise, you did far more than that. I think it's time this company recognized your true talents." His words carried unmistakable determination, and Denise felt it. Yet she still didn't fully grasp all he was about to do. The next morning, just as everyone was starting their workday, an email from the CEO's office sent shockwaves through the company. Within minutes, the announcement had spread to every corner of Halberg International. In it, Jonathan Kellerman formally appointed Denise Atwater to a position that had never existed before at the company. Given her outstanding abilities and exceptional language skills, I am appointing Ms. Denise Atwater as Director of International Cultural Relations. Effective immediately, she will manage and coordinate our multicultural partnerships with international stakeholders. The buzz was immediate and frenzied, from the reception desk to the break room, in whispered managerial meetings and small departmental huddles. Many were stunned, others found it impossible to accept. Down the hall on the 21st floor, Victor Bryant stared at his phone screen in silence, his expression darkening. He had spent nearly 20 years at Halberg, climbing the ranks through cunning and ambition. Now, a woman who had cleaned floors for 13 years had leapfrogged over him to a role equal to, if not more prominent than, his own. Victor's eyes glinted with cold hostility as he silently plotted to undermine the newly appointed director. Meanwhile, in the basement break room, Denise sat frozen on a small chair, her heart racing. She read and reread the announcement as if doubting what she was seeing. Director of International Cultural Relations. Those words filled her with joy and disbelief. She had never imagined herself in such a position. Overnight, she had gone from being invisible to center stage. Lost in her swirling thoughts, Denise barely noticed when the break room door burst open. Victor entered, his gaze icy, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Congratulations, Director Atwater. From scrubbing toilets to holding a senior post. Quite the magical leap, isn't it?" Denise looked up, clearly sensing the contempt in his tone and eyes, but this time she was no longer the timid girl who could be bullied. "Thank you, Mr. Bryant," she replied, calmly and politely. "I know I have a lot to learn from experienced colleagues like you." Victor sneered, eyes challenging. "We'll see how long you last in that role. Remember, this environment is far tougher than anything you've faced." He turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Denise watched his retreating back, knowing he would not stop at mere taunts. The real challenge was just beginning. A few hours later, Denise's inbox filled with congratulations from coworkers, but also with veiled doubts about her true capabilities. She realized the attention she now had was a double-edged sword, both a wonderful opportunity and the toughest trial she'd ever face. At the end of the day, Jonathan summoned Denise to his office. As she entered, she immediately saw the concern and support on his face. "I know this decision will spark mixed reactions, Denise," Jonathan said earnestly. "But I'm confident you're the perfect fit for this role. Don't worry, I'll always have your back." Denise looked at him, gratitude welling up inside her. But she also understood that from this moment on she would confront resistance and covert schemes from people like Victor Bryant. "Sir, I will do everything I can not to let you down," she replied firmly. Jonathan smiled and patted her shoulder gently, a final encouragement before she embarked on the greatest battle of her life. As the office door closed behind her, Denise took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. She knew this was the turning point of her life, full of promise but also fraught with storms and challenges. Denise had just stepped out of Jonathan's office, her heart still racing with a blend of excitement and anxiety. The large doors closed softly behind her, yet she felt as though another door had swung wide open, one leading to a future full of promise, but no less fraught with challenges. No sooner had she left the executive suite than every pair of eyes along the hallway turned toward her. Denise could feel the curious, judgmental, even contemptuous stares. Whispers rose around her with each step, making her stride feel heavier and heavier. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. She opened the message from her closest colleague, Ashley. "Congrats, Denise, but be careful. Not everyone's happy. Eleanor Craig just called an emergency board meeting about you." Reading those words, Denise felt an invisible weight settle on her chest. The name Eleanor Craig rang in her mind like a warning bell, cold, formidable, and downright frightening. Eleanor was a veteran board member, renowned for her strict conservative stance and her unwillingness to accept any change she hadn't personally approved. While Denise wrestled with that unsettling news on the 22nd floor boardroom, Eleanor Craig rose before the entire board, her expression icy and her gaze sharpened like a blade. "Jonathan, have you really thought this through?" Eleanor's voice cut through the room with authority, silencing every murmured comment. Jonathan looked up, steady and resolute. "Yes, I have. Denise is the best person for this role. What she accomplished in yesterday's meeting with the Brazilian partners proves that beyond doubt." Eleanor gave a thin, dismissive smile, doubt flashing in her eyes. The best? A woman who's been a janitor for over 10 years, with no relevant degree and no management experience. How do you think that will affect morale among the hundreds of highly skilled employees here? Her words carried weight, and a few board members nodded in agreement. Jonathan sensed Eleanor rallying her allies. Denise has skills no degree can measure, he replied calmly but firmly. She embodies the values this company stands for: talent, diversity, and perseverance. Eleanor crossed her arms, her tone challenging. We'll see how long those values keep her in this position, Jonathan. I have my doubts. Meanwhile, downstairs, Denise sat alone in the small office now assigned to her. Less than 2 hours into her new position, she already felt the pressure mounting. Her inbox filled with anonymous, sarcastic emails. Colleagues shot her cold glances as they passed by. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Denise looked up to see a small group of younger staff, led by Jessica Miller, a newly minted MBA and project manager. "Hello, Director Atwater," Jessica began, her tone laced with sarcasm. "We're here to congratulate you on your rather unexpected promotion." Denise rose and offered a polite smile. "Thank you. I'll do my best to excel in this role." Jessica let out a soft, mocking laugh. "Sure. Let's hope your chair polishing skills serve the company better than our management degrees." Her companions chuckled, their disdain on full display. Denise felt the sting of their words, but took a steadying breath. "I understand your skepticism," she said calmly, "but I hope you'll judge me by my results, not my past." Jessica arched an eyebrow. "We'll be watching your every move, Denise. Don't disappoint us." They filed out, leaving Denise alone with her pounding heart. She realized the cruelty of the corporate world extended beyond job duties. It lay in the scornful looks and whispered barbs of those she'd hoped would be allies. The door clicked shut, and Denise sat in heavy silence. She knew the road ahead would be tougher than anything she'd ever faced. Yet she also understood this was her one chance to prove Jonathan's faith and her own self-worth well placed. Up on the executive floors, Eleanor Craig stood by the expansive window, looking down over the offices below like a queen surveying her domain. She lifted her phone, her voice cold and determined. "I want a complete background check on Denise Atwater. I don't believe a janitor can walk into a boardroom and earn this level of trust." Hanging up, Eleanor's eyes gleamed with dangerous resolve. Denise might think she was stepping into the light, but Eleanor would make sure she didn't do so unchallenged, and was ready to prove Jonathan's decision a grave mistake. Just a few days into her new role, Denise realized the real battle was only just beginning. Tension followed her every step through the company, but today it reached a new peak when she received a call from Eleanor Craig's personal assistant, calling her up to the top floor at once, to the very seat of power at Halberg International. Denise stood before the grand office door, her stomach churning as though about to enter enemy territory. The door swung open, and there sat Eleanor behind an enormous, polished mahogany desk. Her sharp eyes swept Denise from head to toe with icy disdain. "Have a seat," Eleanor ordered curtly, her tone colder than ice, with not a trace of courtesy. Denise sat, keeping her expression calm despite her heart hammering in her chest. The room fell silent for a few seconds, Eleanor deliberately letting her guest feel small beneath her imposing presence. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice laced with mockery. "I'm very curious, Denise. How does it feel to be suddenly elevated to a position you clearly have no right to?" Denise met Eleanor's gaze, drew a steadying breath, and replied carefully but firmly, "I feel grateful for Mr. Kellerman's trust, ma'am, and I believe I'm fully capable of handling this role." Eleanor smirked, her gaze dripping sarcasm. Capable? A woman who dropped out of college and spent 13 years cleaning floors. Do you honestly think you can manage our multi-million-dollar international relationships? Denise leaned forward slightly, her eyes unwavering. I understand your doubt, ma'am, but what matters is not my past but what I can do now. I believe my results will speak for themselves. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated by Denise's calm confidence. She grabbed a dossier from the desk and tossed it in front of her as a blatant show of disrespect. Then prove it, Eleanor said icily. Here's our stalled contract with the Morocco partner, hung up for over 3 months on cultural and language issues. If you're really as talented as Jonathan claims, explain why this deal still isn't signed. Denise opened the dossier, scanning the interwoven English and Arabic text. Within moments, she saw the problem. Meeting Eleanor's challenging stare, she replied confidently, The issue is simple, ma'am. We used an overly formal, rigid translation into Arabic. In Moroccan culture, genuine warmth and closeness in communication are crucial. Our stiff language made them feel we were keeping our distance and lacking sincerity. Eleanor paused for a heartbeat before regaining her defiant composure. Oh, just that? And you think you can fix it so easily? Denise nodded calmly. I do, ma'am. I can resolve this immediately. Eleanor crossed her arms, doubt and disdain clouding her face. Prove it. Denise retrieved her phone and quickly dialed the Moroccan partner's senior representative. In Eleanor's presence, she spoke fluent, warm Arabic, choosing culturally appropriate terms that conveyed sincerity and respect. Eleanor watched intently, her initial contempt giving way to genuine astonishment. Minutes later, Denise ended the call with a bright smile. Turning back to Eleanor, she said plainly, They've agreed to sign the contract first thing tomorrow, and they'll send their top executive for the ceremony. All they require is that we present the revised agreement in a more heartfelt, approachable translation. Eleanor was speechless for the first time in years. Surprise and anger flashed across her features as she struggled to contain herself. Impressive, Denise, she said through clenched teeth. But you don't really think one small phone call proves your entire worth, do you? Denise met her gaze steadily, eyes shining with confidence. I understand you'll need more time to trust me, but please, judge me by this outcome. I believe it's the best proof I can offer. Eleanor found no retort. For the first time, her power was checked by someone she had underestimated. Anger and unease roiled within her, yet she had to admit that Denise was far more capable than she'd ever imagined. Denise rose, gave Eleanor a respectful nod, and left the room. She knew this confrontation was only the beginning of a challenging journey, but she'd just won a crucial victory. As the door closed behind her, Eleanor's fist clenched in fury, a fierce resolve in her eyes. She would not let Denise advance unchallenged. From this moment on, the power struggle at Halberg International had never been more intense. The door to Eleanor's office closed softly behind Denise, but the quiet battle she was waging showed no sign of ending. Denise knew that, even though she had just won an important skirmish against Eleanor, many challenges still lay ahead. Waves of resistance and doubt were seeping through every corner of Halberg International like a smoldering fire, waiting for the chance to flare up again. She returned to her new office appearing calm, hiding the pressure that surrounded her. Sitting down, she took a deep breath to steady herself after the confrontation. Just then, her door swung open without warning. Victor Bryant stepped in as if he had every right to be there, his face twisted in contempt. I heard you passed Eleanor's little test, he sneered, his cold eyes sizing her up. Congrats. But I wonder, was that real skill or just a lucky break? Denise met his gaze serenely, though she felt his malice. I believe results are the truest measure, Mr. Bryant. If you still doubt me, I'll be happy to prove myself. He curled his lip in a mocking smile. Very confident. But let me be blunt, Denise. I can't imagine a custodian turned director of international cultural relations pulling off anything worthwhile in just a few days. So get ready. I'll show you exactly how harsh this role can be. With that, he slapped a thick stack of documents down on her desk. This is our critical cooperation agreement with our Japanese partners. It's been stalled for 6 months and is on the brink of collapse. If you really have the talents Jonathan claims, handle this yourself. You'll soon see where you stand. Victor turned and strode out, throwing her one last contemptuous look. Denise watched his retreating back, hurt and angry, but she forced herself to stay calm. Opening the dossier with determined eyes, she thought only one clear thought. She would not let people like Victor defeat her. Over the next days, Victor publicly doubted and dismissed Denise in front of the entire international team. In internal meetings, he lobbed barb after barb, constantly reminding everyone of her humble janitorial past to make her feel small. One morning, during a project status meeting, Victor called out sharply before the senior staff, "Denise, do you really think someone with no formal management experience or training can handle a complex contract like the one with our Japanese partners?" All eyes turned to Denise, the room crackling with tension. She drew a steady breath and met his challenge head-on. "Mr. Bryant, if you think formal qualifications are the sole prerequisite for international deals, you've overlooked something far more important: deep cultural understanding and sincere communication." Victor frowned, taken aback by her incisive reply. Undeterred, he pressed on, "Sounds nice, but what do you actually plan to do when this Japanese contract has dragged on for months with no resolution? What magic trick will you pull out now?" Denise smiled calmly. "No magic needed, Mr. Bryant. I've already contacted our Japanese counterparts and identified the core issue." Victor paused, his composure cracking. The room fell into an uneasy silence. "In their culture," Denise explained, "we failed to observe their key protocols and courtesies. For example, we negotiated via email instead of arranging formal in-person meetings, which made them feel slighted and eroded their trust." She fixed her gaze on Victor, speaking clearly and confidently. "I've drafted a formal apology letter following their traditional etiquette and arranged an official meeting in the style they expect. This morning, our Japanese partners replied that they're ready to resume negotiations in good faith and that the deal will close by the end of this week." Victor sat stunned, his face paling with surprise and embarrassment. Whispers rippled through the room as colleagues shifted from doubt to genuine admiration for Denise. Without a hint of triumph, she turned back to Victor. "Mr. Bryant, I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I hope you'll judge me by these results. Because results speak for themselves." Victor had no comeback. He rose, seething with anger and humiliation, as Denise's deft handling of his challenge left him speechless. As Denise left the meeting, she felt the respectful looks of her colleagues, all evidence that, while Victor still refused to accept her, she had earned their respect and, most importantly, reaffirmed her own confidence. Still, she knew the storms were far from over. Even greater tests lay ahead on her path. Stepping out of the conference room, Denise could still feel Victor's heavy gaze tracking her from behind. Yet, for the first time in days, his icy stare no longer frightened her. She knew she had done what no excuses or formal credentials ever could. She had proven her abilities through concrete action, silencing Victor and every other skeptic into reconsideration. The following days passed in a whirlwind of meaningful activity for Denise. She threw herself into the critical Morocco deal, the same strategic partnership Victor and his team had failed to advance for over 3 months. Denise understood that this was her greatest opportunity to cement her place and demonstrate her worth at Halberg International. After a series of calls and negotiations, the most important day finally arrived. The senior Moroccan representative arrived at Halberg, entering the conference room with an unusually warm demeanor. Denise had meticulously arranged every detail, studying Moroccan culture, etiquette, and even the smallest communication nuances to ensure nothing went awry. Victor stood at the back of the room, his eyes skeptical as though waiting for Denise to slip up, but she remained unfazed. With confident grace, she stepped forward and greeted the Moroccan delegation in flawless, courteous Arabic. Their faces lit up with genuine approval. The negotiation began smoothly, until the Moroccans unexpectedly requested significant minute changes to the contract. Tension rippled through the room. Victor's eyebrows arched as though he'd found the perfect moment to ridicule Denise. But Denise was prepared. She smiled calmly and addressed the delegation in warm, fluent Arabic, skillfully and persuasively explaining each sensitive point. She walked them through every clause, clarifying the new requests with precision. The partners listened intently, then nodded in agreement. "We are very impressed by Ms. Atwater's deep understanding and goodwill," said the Moroccan lead sincerely. "We agree to sign the contract today." The room erupted in enthusiastic applause. For the first time, Victor was utterly speechless, his eyes wide with astonishment and disappointment. Jonathan stood beside Denise, beaming with pride. Once the deal was sealed, Jonathan unexpectedly addressed everyone in the room. "I want you all to know that this critical agreement was successfully concluded thanks to the outstanding efforts and leadership of Ms. Denise Atwater. In recognition of her exceptional contributions, I am naming our main training room the Atwater Room in her honor." The applause swept through the conference room once more. Denise stood still, her heart pounding as she heard her name emblazoned on the plaque. After years of being invisible, she felt the deepest, most genuine recognition from the very people who had once overlooked her. Yet, in the corner of the room, Eleanor Craig and Victor Bryant stood side by side, their gazes sharp and cold. Eleanor leaned in so Victor could hear. "She's becoming too dangerous. If we don't act now, we'll lose control." Victor's hand clenched in agreement. "Rest assured, I won't let her continue this unchallenged." Denise didn't hear their whispered plotting, but she understood that people like Eleanor and Victor would not relent. However, the validation and support she'd received from Jonathan and from the company at large gave her fresh strength. She knew that no matter what storms lay ahead, she would no longer be afraid. That evening, after everyone else had left, Denise stood alone in front of the newly named Atwater Room. Tears sprang to her eyes, not of sorrow, but of release, as she finally felt freed from the weight of years spent unseen. Suddenly, Jonathan's kindly voice came from behind her. "Denise, you deserve this, and more." She turned, quickly brushing away a tear, and smiled at him. "Thank you for believing in me, Mr. Kellerman. I never imagined this day would come." He nodded, his tone warm and heartfelt. "I have always believed a person's true worth isn't defined by where they start, but by how they rise to every challenge. You are the finest proof of that." Denise met his gaze and nodded firmly. "I will keep giving my all, so I won't let you, or the company, down." Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, then left. Denise stayed a moment longer, feeling a new strength stirring within her. In the shadowed corner, Victor watched, his expression colder than ever. What Denise didn't know was that he was already hatching another, more insidious plan to bring her down. She knew her battle at Halberg International was only beginning, but this time she would not let anyone defeat her again. The next morning, when Denise stepped into her new office, she still felt the warmth of yesterday's moments. She sat quietly at her desk, took a deep breath, and tried to center her thoughts. Soft morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the desktop, where a small envelope lay waiting for her. Denise was surprised. She couldn't recall expecting any mail. The envelope was plain, with no sender's name or return address. Curious, Denise opened it and found a pristine sheet of paper inside, with neat, straightforward handwriting that nonetheless carried a gentle timidity. "Hello, Miss Denise. You don't know me, but I've worked at Halberg for 5 years. I'm just a lowly receptionist. Always invisible, much like you used to be. When I learned your story, it felt like seeing light at the end of a dark tunnel. I spent years thinking my efforts would never be recognized. But now, because of you, I understand that no effort is ever wasted. You are my greatest inspiration. Thank you for giving me hope. An invisible person was seen because of you." Denise sat there, stunned, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the letter. Tears welled up and blurred her vision, falling onto the paper like tiny, heartfelt drops. She never imagined her journey could inspire someone so profoundly. In that moment, Denise realized her true responsibility, not only to excel in her role, but to become a beacon of encouragement for those quietly struggling in the shadows, just as she once had. From then on, she would represent not just herself, but hope, perseverance, and strength for everyone at Halberg International. Over the following days, Denise began to notice the employees she had once passed by without a second glance. She realized there were many people still carrying doubt and hesitation, convinced they could never achieve anything great. One late afternoon, she spotted Ashley, a junior administrative assistant, sitting alone in the break room, her face blank and her eyes red from crying. Denise quietly joined her, her voice gentle and sincere. "Ashley, are you okay?" Startled, Ashley wiped her tears. "I'm fine, Miss Denise. I'm just a little tired." Denise looked into the young woman's eyes, smiled softly, and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I've been where you are, Ashley. You don't have to hide anything from me. What's on your mind?" Ashley burst into tears and confessed that she had been working tirelessly for a year without any recognition, and that her supervisor constantly criticized her unfairly. Denise listened attentively and nodded in understanding. "I know how you feel more than anyone. But you know what our greatest strength is? It's not praise from others, but believing in your own worth. Don't let negative words take that away." Ashley dabbed her eyes, looking at Denise with profound gratitude. "Thank you so much, Miss Denise. Your story gave me so much motivation. I never expected you'd notice someone as small as me." Denise smiled warmly, "Because I was once you, and you are the reason I keep going." From that day forward, Denise quietly became a mentor to many other employees. She spent extra time after work guiding them through challenges, encouraging them to trust in their own abilities. Slowly, Denise's small acts of support began to ripple across the company. Junior staff, those who once felt invisible, now sought her out as a source of strength. They started to believe in themselves more and grew more confident when facing difficulties. But this positive change soon reached Eleanor and Victor. In her shadowy office, Eleanor listened as Victor reported with clear irritation, "Denise is becoming some sort of symbol around here. She's gathered a quiet following, especially among the junior staff." I don't think we can allow her influence to spread any further." Eleanor ground her teeth, her eyes cold and malicious. "You're right. If she keeps this up, our power and influence will be seriously threatened. You must act, Victor. Find a way to bring her down before it's too late." Victor nodded, his gaze as sharp as a blade. "Rest assured, I have a plan. Denise will pay for her audacity." At that moment, Denise had no idea she was becoming a target as never before. She continued her work quietly, not for fame, not for power, but for one simple truth: to bring hope to those who, like her, had once been invisible. And though even greater challenges awaited her, Denise knew she would never be alone again. She would stand strong against anything, because she understood she had become a symbol of hope for everyone who had ever felt unseen. Denise was still lost in warm thoughts about the positive changes she was helping to create when a sharp, urgent knock on her office door jolted her back to reality. The door swung open, and Ashley's anxious face appeared, letting Denise know something serious had just happened. "Miss Denise, have you seen the internal email?" Ashley panted, her voice shaky with fear. "Eleanor just sent a message to the entire board accusing you of falsifying your credentials." Denise's heart seemed to stop. She opened the email at once, her eyes scanning Eleanor Craig's official message, each cold accusation feeling like a knife to her core. "To the Halberg International Board of Directors, I regret to inform you that I have received credible information indicating that Ms. Denise Atwater falsified her academic credentials to secure the position of Director of International Cultural Relations. This is a serious breach of business ethics and company integrity. I urge an immediate investigation to clarify this matter. Sincerely, Eleanor Craig." Denise sat frozen, as though her whole world had crumbled. The vicious allegations were utterly untrue, but Eleanor's influence and the gravity of the claim placed Denise in immediate peril. Everything she had earned, through sweat and tears, now teetered on the brink of ruin. Elsewhere in the building, Jonathan Kellerman stood stunned in front of his computer screen. He knew the accusations were baseless, but Eleanor had skillfully swayed the board, forcing his hand to launch a formal inquiry. His heart ached at the thought of Denise, his most trusted ally, once again ensnared in this ruthless political game. He immediately called an emergency board meeting. In the sleek conference room, Eleanor sat calm and unshaken, her eyes gleaming with triumph as though she'd struck the final blow. Victor Bryant sat beside her, a faint, satisfied smile on his lips. Jonathan entered, determination on his face, yet fear in his heart. He understood this was a conspiracy to destroy Denise's reputation, but the board's pressure was overpowering. "Jonathan, you see for yourself," Eleanor began, her tone dripping with sanctimony. "I'm deeply disappointed to learn that the person you trusted may have committed fraud. We cannot ignore this, or the company's reputation will suffer." Jonathan kept his voice steady and clear. "We cannot draw any conclusions until a thorough investigation is completed. I assure the board that Denise Atwater is beyond reproach in both competence and ethics." Eleanor arched an eyebrow, her voice icy and sarcastic. "You're being sentimental, Jonathan. Don't forget your duty as CEO is to protect the company, not a potentially fraudulent employee." The board promptly voted to demand a comprehensive investigation. Jonathan had no choice but to comply, even though it broke his heart. As he left the room, he called Denise to his private office. Denise appeared, her eyes red but her composure intact. She looked at Jonathan, voice trembling yet sincere. "Mr. Kellerman, please believe me. I've done nothing dishonest. Everything I've achieved is the result of my own hard work." Jonathan met her gaze with compassion and resolve. I have always believed in you, Denise, but right now we have no choice but to investigate. Eleanor has pushed this too far, and the board is demanding it." Denise nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her voice remained firm. "I understand, sir. I'm ready to cooperate fully to prove my innocence." Jonathan squeezed her hand in genuine support, his voice resolute. "We will get through this, Denise. I promise I will do everything I can to protect you." Meanwhile, in her office, Eleanor smiled in satisfaction at the ruthless effectiveness of her maneuver. Victor stood across from her, admiration and caution in his eyes. "You are formidable, Eleanor," he whispered. "I never imagined you could push Denise into a corner like this." Eleanor's lips curved in a chilling smile. She must learn her place. Does Denise think a few lucky breaks allow her to challenge me? This will be her and Jonathan's final lesson in power. They will both see that authority isn't for the likes of her. Victor nodded, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. He realized Eleanor didn't only intend to topple Denise, she was determined to cement her own absolute power within the company. Elsewhere, Denise quietly returned to her office. She sat down and braced herself against the fierce storm gathering around her. She knew this was the hardest battle of her career, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Clutching the small letter she'd received before, she vowed, no matter how fierce the challenge, she would stand firm and honor the trust and hope everyone had placed in her. Over the following days, Halberg International sank into an unprecedented heavy atmosphere. One investigation after another, one round of questioning after the next, fell upon Denise's honor and spirit like hammer blows. Yet every time she faced Eleanor's and her allies' vicious inquiries, Denise calmly responded with nothing but the honest truth. She understood she could not allow these false accusations to break her. She had to stand firm, not just for herself, but for all those who were placing their trust and hope in her. Meanwhile, Jonathan Kellerman was quietly conducting a thorough investigation of his own, using every resource at his disposal to uncover the truth. He personally verified Denise's past records and documents down to the smallest detail, certain that the charges were baseless. Jonathan knew, however, that only by publicly laying out the full facts could he finally put these dark schemes to rest once and for all. On Friday afternoon, Jonathan abruptly summoned the entire board of directors and every employee to the company's main auditorium. The vast, light-filled room fell silent as everyone held their breath, awaiting the CEO's announcement. Eleanor Craig sat in the front row, her face all but stone. Cold, though a flicker of unease passed behind her eyes. Beside her, Victor Bryant's brow tightened, sensing the tide was beginning to turn beyond their control. Standing center stage, Jonathan's voice rang out, confident yet grave. "Members of the board and colleagues of Halberg International, today I will disclose the complete truth behind the accusations leveled against Director Denise Atwater." He turned to Denise, who sat calmly in the audience, his gaze steady with encouragement. "After a detailed and comprehensive investigation, I can affirm that all allegations of credential falsification against Denise Atwater are entirely false and fabricated." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the auditorium. Eleanor startled, her complexion draining. Victor sat up straighter, tension etched on his face. Jonathan pressed on, his tone firm and unwavering. "I have personally contacted Kent State University and received official confirmation that Denise was an excellent student, with no indication of any misrepresentation in her records. Furthermore, our investigation has found that it was Eleanor Craig, and several of her accomplices, who intentionally manufactured and disseminated this false information to undermine Denise. An uproar broke out as eyes turned accusingly toward Eleanor. She sprang to her feet, her voice quivering though she tried to maintain her usual composure. "Jonathan, you are accusing me without justification." Jonathan's stare was colder and sharper than ever. "The evidence is unambiguous, Eleanor. Every forged email, every planted rumor has been verified. I will not allow anyone to misuse their power to destroy the reputation and career of an innocent person like Denise Atwater." An attorney from the legal team stepped forward and projected the damning proof onto the big screen. Email threads, text messages between Eleanor and Victor, plotting Denise's downfall, laid bare for all to see. No one could deny it. Victor bowed his head in shame, avoiding everyone's gaze. Eleanor stood frozen, her face ashen, utterly stripped of confidence. Jonathan addressed the board with solemn resolve. "I recommend the board take immediate and decisive action against these unethical behaviors. Halberg International will never tolerate such betrayal of business ethics." Without hesitation, the board convened right there and, in under 10 minutes, delivered their verdict. Given the irrefutable evidence, the board unanimously votes to remove Miss Eleanor Craig from her position, effective immediately. All her roles and privileges within the company are hereby revoked. The auditorium buzzed with triumphant applause and approving chatter. Eleanor looked around in despair and fury, then shot a final icy glance at Denise and Jonathan before departing in a chilling silence. Jonathan stepped down from the stage and approached Denise, a warm, proud smile lighting his face. "Denise, I'm sorry you had to endure all of this, but I believe that, in the end, the truth always prevails. You are wholly deserving of your position." Denise met his eyes, tears of genuine joy streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you for believing in me to the very end." Thunderous applause filled the room anew. Colleagues rose to their feet, their eyes shining with respect and admiration for her. From his seat, Victor watched in silent regret and shame. He realized too late the grave mistake he made by following Eleanor's lead, failing to recognize Denise's true value from the start. Surrounded by her peers' heartfelt support, Denise felt an overwhelming sense of validation. In that moment, she knew she had overcome the greatest challenge of her life, and finally been recognized for who she truly was. For Denise, this victory was not only personal, but a triumph of integrity, perseverance, and truth over sinister plots and wrongful power. As soon as the truth came to light, Denise didn't just reclaim her honor. She became a powerful emblem of perseverance, integrity, and courage at Halberg International. Before long, the story of the former janitor who rose above dark schemes to become a senior manager spread far beyond the company's walls, inspiring countless people facing similar circumstances. Local newspapers and business media outlets repeatedly covered Denise Atwater's remarkable journey. Admiration poured in not only from outside, but from every level within Halberg, from entry-level staff to top executives, who began looking at her with completely new eyes. Denise was no longer the invisible woman she once was. She had become a beacon of hope and the embodiment of limitless ambition. Jonathan Kellerman quickly recognized that Denise's impact extended well beyond her own success. He decided to partner with her to create a special training program called Voice Inside, designed to identify, support, and develop the hidden talents within the company. People like Denise who had quietly worked in the shadows without ever being acknowledged. The launch ceremony for Voice Inside was held in Halberg International's largest auditorium, attended by the media, corporate partners, and every employee. On a simply but meaningfully decorated stage, Jonathan stepped up, beaming with pride as he introduced the program's co-founder, Denise Atwater. When Denise climbed the podium, the entire audience rose in a thunderous standing ovation. The roar of applause moved her deeply. Tears of pride and gratitude glistened in her eyes. This was not only her personal moment, but a historic one for all those who'd ever felt abandoned or overlooked and were now looking to her with renewed hope. Denise surveyed the hall, her voice clear, strong, and imbued with emotion. Standing here today, I want to thank everyone who believed in and supported me, especially Mr. Jonathan Kellerman. But most of all, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to all the invisible people I once mirrored. I stand here on behalf of those forgotten souls who never believed they'd have a chance to prove their true worth. She paused and glanced at the front row, where Victor Bryant sat in stunned silence, his former arrogance and contempt replaced by deep respect and a hint of late regret. Life will always test us with challenges that seem insurmountable, but I believe we all carry tremendous strength within us, the power of truth, perseverance, and hope. The Voice Inside program will help everyone discover and unleash that power, Denise continued, her voice trembling with feeling. The auditorium fell silent, hanging on each of Denise's words as they resonated in every heart. When she concluded, the applause erupted even louder and longer than before, seeming to go on without end. After the ceremony, as Denise stepped down from the stage, groups of young employees hurried forward, eyes shining with aspiration. "Denise, because of you, I believe I can achieve my dreams too," Ashley said, her voice quivering as she grasped Denise's hand, pouring out all her sincere emotion. Denise offered a gentle, encouraging smile. "Always believe in yourself, Ashley. You already have that strength inside. You just have to see it." From across the room, Jonathan watched the scene, a satisfied smile on his face. He approached Denise and quietly said, "Denise, today you've inspired not only Halberg but countless others out there. I'm proud to be on this journey with you." Denise looked at him with heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you, Jonathan. You were the first to see me when no one else did. You didn't just give me a chance. You gave me the strength to find my true place." Jonathan nodded warmly. "You deserve every bit of this, Denise. You've opened a new door, not just for yourself, but for many others." Meanwhile, in a shadowed corner of the auditorium, Eleanor Craig stood alone, her gaze now full of remorse and bitterness as she realized the greatest mistake of her life, underestimating Denise's true strength, the power born of honesty and unshakable self-belief. As the crowd dispersed, Denise knew her life would never be the same. No more fear of being unseen, no more anxiety over criticism or scheming. She had found her rightful place, and in doing so had helped many others discover their own worth. Outside, beneath the vast blue sky, Denise smiled softly. She was no longer invisible. She had become a symbol of hope, guiding hidden talents like her former self into the light, where they could stand proudly and claim their value. The wide-open door before Denise represented not just her own future, but that of many others waiting for her help to step through, and she knew, without a doubt, that this was where she truly belonged, the place she had earned through courage, faith, and relentless perseverance. That is the emotional journey of Denise Atwater, a woman once deemed invisible who overcame every obstacle to claim her rightful place. Denise stands not just as a symbol of courage and persistence, but as a powerful reminder that true worth does not lie in one's title or position, but in how we face and conquer life's challenges. What do you think of Denise's journey? If you were in her shoes, would you have the strength to face similar trials? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If her story inspired and motivated you, please hit the like button, share it widely to spread this powerful message, and be sure to subscribe so you won't miss more meaningful stories. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.